Good evening and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and you're watching the special broadcast at 8. On tonight's show, US President Donald Trump's son-in-law is in Israel aimed at restarting the stalled Israel-Palestine peace talks. What can he bring to the table? That's later on the show. But first, newly elected French President Emmanuel Macron has done what his predecessors have not done before him. On Wednesday, he said he saw no legitimate successor to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, and France no longer considers his departure a precondition to resolving the 7-year-old conflict. Take a look.
French President Emmanuel Macron made those remarks in his interview to 8 European newspapers. It comes as a stark contrast to the previous French administration's stand and echoes Russia's position that there is no viable alternative to Assad. Macron said, and I quote, "The new perspective that I have had on this subject is that I have not stated that Bashar al-Assad's departure is a precondition for everything because nobody has shown me a legitimate successor," unquote. He said that Assad was an enemy of the Syrian people but not of France, and that France's priority was a total commitment to fighting terrorist groups and ensuring the country did not become a failed state. But Macron's policy change on Syria has raised many eyebrows, as it is a departure from the policies of his predecessor, François Hollande. Hollande had pitched for Assad to be toppled in order to stabilize Syria. Hollande had also defended the US airstrikes on Syria following the 2013 chemical weapons attack at Ghouta. Hollande had said, and I quote, "President Assad alone carries responsibility for these developments, with his repeated use of chemical weapons and his crimes against his own people," unquote. The French president's policy shift comes as a surprise to its biggest allies, the United States and the United Kingdom. Both consistently sought a regime change in Syria. And now, with Macron changing his stand, the pertinent question is, will France pull out of the Syrian quagmire? Bureau Report, WION.
All right, joining me on the discussion tonight is Francois Gauthier, a French political writer and journalist who joins me via Skype from Puducherry in southern India. Good evening, Francois. Good to have you back on WION. Now, explain to our viewers who might be watching you tonight the text, the context and the subtext of President Macron's remarks.
Well, you see, it's a very welcome declaration because for a long time, Western nations, France included, have supported the terrorists, the groups that are against Assad, which are very radical Islamists. And at some point, even, the Americans and some of the European nations gave them weapons to fight Assad. But Assad is obviously, the lesser evil. And Mr. Macron took the right decision by saying that the first people to be fought are the terrorists, those who advocate the caliphate, those, who support people who blow themselves up in London or in Paris. So it's the right decision. And then he added something which I find very interesting, is that, we should support Russia, because up to now, not only Assad has been the enemy, but the Russians have become the enemy of the West. And the Russians are on the Western side. I mean, they all suffer terrorism. The Russians are suffering from terrorism, France is suffering from terrorism, and these groups are mostly in Syria and Iraq. So I think Mr. Macron took the right decision, and, we had a lot of hope in him, and today, he's fulfilled that hope.
Also, Francois, what explains this rethink, as it were, on the part of President Macron? What might be driving this change in policy, as it were?
Well, I think first he wants to veer away. He wants to demarcate himself from Mr. Hollande, who has always said that the first condition for peace in Syria is the removal of Mr. Assad. So he's showing that he is his own man. He is the new president. He has new policies. And secondly, I have a feeling that he doesn't like Mr. Trump very much. And Mr. Trump, finally, since, he became president, has had a different policy towards Syria than one he advocated when he was campaigning. And Mr. Trump is against the Russian. At times he's shown that he's more against Syria than he's against the terrorists. So I don't think Mr. Macron and Mr. Trump had a very good meeting, though Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump, we gel together. But Mr. Trump and Mr. Macron, I think it didn't go very well.
Also, Francois, how will it reflect on the coalition per se, the US and its coalition partners, especially in the NATO alliance? How will it impact other countries who might be tempted to rethink their respective national positions on a civil war, on a situation which many say around the world is the biggest humanitarian crisis of our time?
I think some of the European countries are going to fall in line with Mr. Macron. Now, it depends what the United States will say now. Probably UK will follow, United States because it always followed the foreign policy that Washington advocates. But I think Mr. Macron made a bold move, and a lot of leaders, world leaders, are going to follow him. That the first task to get rid of the terrorists, and then we see about Mr. Assad, because he's definitely, a dictator, but he's the lesser evil. And I think it was true for Iraq. Iraq was more of a secular, Islamic country. And by removing its president and killing him, United States created a huge chaos. So Mr. Macron took the right decision. And I think it's going to be, next few days, there's going to be a lot of rethinking and, as you say, realigning. And probably Mr. Macron will position himself, as a world leader, one who can be followed by other world leaders. And that is good for France.
Fair point, Francois. Now, you've laid out the ground, as it were, for understanding the turnaround in French position. We've spoken about the context and probably the subtext of President Macron's remarks. Now, if I were to ask you to dwell a little bit on the content of his remarks in particular, first of all, if I want to quote him again, he says, nobody has shown me a legitimate successor, number one. And number two, he says, Assad is an enemy of the Syrian people, but not of France. What do you make of these remarks?
Well, I think what he didn't say, what we should look at is what he didn't say. The problem is that France is facing a lot of refugees, and so is Europe. And by crashing the ISIS and the Islamic groups, probably, some kind of stability will come back to Syria, and it is hoped that, the flow of the refugees will lessen. Now, I don't know, I never met Mr. Macron, actually. I didn't meet Mr. Hollande, but I never met Mr. Macron. I don't know what he's thinking in terms of, Islam, and whether he thinks that it's important now that to make an alliance with Assad and the Russians. But it looks like he's leading that way. It looks like for the first time in the West, there is a Western leader who said, the Russians are on our side. They also, white people in brackets, they're also under attack by Islamists, and we need to side with them. Now, there's a lot of confusion about Mr. Trump. Nobody knows what this guy is going to do the next minute. That is, that's the confusion. That is the enigma. What is Mr. Trump going to say tomorrow? Is he going to tweet tomorrow morning that Mr. Macron, is his enemy, or is he going to tweet that he loves Mr. Macron? Nobody knows, and that is the big question mark.
Right, Francois. If I were to turn the question on its head and ask you the following question. Now, we heard the French president say there that removal of Assad is not a priority, and so on and so forth. But remember, candidate Trump, or in fact President Trump and his team, said more or less the same remarks a few months ago until they decided to turn around and change their policy 180 degrees. Remember, Trump and his team said, one, that Assad's removal is not a priority, and two, that the people of Syria themselves will decide the fate of their country. Now, if Trump could do a 180-degree turn, why should anyone take Macron at his face value? What is the guarantee that tomorrow the NATO allies, the US and its allies, will not lean on Macron and get him around to their point of view?
Well, Macron, is a big mystery because nobody knows. He's coming out of nowhere. He was the finance minister of Mr. Hollande, and, a pretty pretty neutral, and he didn't make any weight when he was finance minister. And suddenly he resigned and started campaigning and started a new party, a new party that got 300 plus seats in the parliament, which is something unheard in France. Traditionally, it's like in India. Traditionally, in France, there are rightist parties and leftist parties, and the communists are right. The right really wins. Sometimes the socialists win, but the communists, except in the 30s, they never won. So Mr. Macron is an unknown quantity. We do not know what he thinks. We have no idea what are his opinions, because as a finance minister, he never expressed himself on the international issues. Now he has for the first time, and I do believe that it is something that he believes himself. That's his own opinion. He must have had his opinion before becoming president. Now that he is in the supreme seat in France, he's expressed his wish. He's shown what direction France wants to take in terms of Syria.
Right.
And I think the French are going to support him. I mean, obviously, the Muslim minority of France, is very volatile. There's a small portion of it, which leans towards, Islamic, violence. But he's taken that risk, and it's pretty bold, and we need to applaud him.
Right, Francois. Unfortunately, we have completely run out of time. Good to have you speak about the French politics of the day. And we hope to have you back on WION soon. That was Francois Gauthier, a French writer and journalist who was joining us from Puducherry in southern India.